Welcome, everyone. An unbelievable episode upon us. This is episode 24 at the Gym Guys podcast. Myself, Chris Scotto, otherwise known as Drago1850 on Instagram, joined by Scott Applebaum, integrated wellness, anti-aging, fitness, strength coach, also owns his own pet ice cream store, right, Scotty?
Yeah, ice cream
Uh,
store and bakery, yeah.
Pet
Scooby Doo's, you
treats,
gotta plug it.
Scooby Doo's.
Scoopy, as in scoop.
With a P,
Scooby
not a
Doo's.
B.
That's correct, yeah.
And you'll see a lot of the alignment here in the history with our featured guest, along with Scott. We have, of course, Eric Schwartz, owner of Paw Power nutritional supplements for pets and dogs. Former employee of 11 years of Animal, been in the business for 14 years. Also does supplement critique and reviews on his TikTok video. And as you could see, our guest tonight is super special. I met this gentleman while he was waiting online at the Mr. O in November in Orlando for Mike O'Hearn, and he was kind enough to talk to me and just kind of shed some wisdom. And I said, "Hey, one day I'd love to have you on our podcast." And well, here we are. So, everyone, if you don't know him, the DNA, the fabric of Gold's Gym, recently Hall of Fame inductee for Gold's Gym, the Mecca as we know it from the very late 70s, 80s through the 90s before he sold it in 1999. Please, welcome our special guest, Ed Connors. Ed, welcome to Gym Guys Podcast. Thank you for being on our show.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
I'm at a gym opening in North Dallas, and someone just pulled up on their motorcycle, so it's a little bit noisy, but it should be quieter in a minute.
We appreciate you making the time during this event.
The,
It doesn't surprise us that we're getting you on a podcast while you're at a gym event as well. So that's pretty awesome.
I think I've seen more gyms than anyone else alive.
What's the name of the gym, Ed, that you're at?
The gym is called Hidden Gym.
Okay, so Greg's gym, Greg McCoy. I know Greg.
But I found it, and I'm here. And
It's not so hidden. Hey, if Greg is there, put him on. I'd be happy to say hello.
That's awesome.
Hello.
So yeah, I mean, real quick, Ed, we know, your history is unbelievable, reading the book, watching other podcasts about you. I mean, it's just absolutely amazing the influence you've had on the industry, on the gym industry, franchising. I mean, a real true pioneer. And probably the biggest thing that I think we all got on this podcast, learning about you, was just your overall generosity and giving people that chance, opening that door for them, but letting them walk. I think could be the one most important thing that I got from what I learned about you thus far, which is amazing. From buying the gym in 1979, being in 46 states, 26 countries, over 700 locations, I think at its height, to selling it in 1999, and just still your influence during those years and what you've done, most importantly, for all the athletes that you can, dare I say, farmed, to not only, grow your business, but obviously give them a great chance in the sport, whether they were wrestlers, whether they were bodybuilders, whether they were, just overall Olympic athletes, celebrities. I just think it's, one thing that Scott and I and Eric talked about before the show was helping everyone appreciate who you are and what you've done for the gym industry, what you've done for athletes, what you've done for people, and how you've really revolutionized this whole industry that we're in, and just overall health and fitness. So again, thank you for taking the time out today to speak to us.
thank you. Well, all these people that I've known actually were key in making Gold's Gym the Mecca and the largest gym chain in the world. So as much as I was perhaps helping them, they were also helping me and my partners and fitness in America. In my book, I think one of the strong themes I feel is that Gold's Gym, along with Joe Weider and Arnold, changed the culture regarding fitness. So it was a whole different time 50 years ago. I mean, what's so incredible to think about is that Arnold Schwarzenegger had to go from Graz, Austria to Venice, California to get a workout. Now, like where I am right now in Dallas, Texas, you can go any mile, at least before COVID, and find a workout facility. So it's the world is different, and I don't think a lot of people fully understand that. And I'm sure what I'm going to see here is a gym that's more like what existed back in the 80s or 90s. Of course, much, probably better equipped, but small. So it's really back to the future with gyms right now, because the big box gyms are in trouble. So it's really important to know the history.
That's a
I've
great
kind of
description.
felt like, I've kind of felt like there's been a shift the last year or two with the Globo gyms and getting back to more real mom and pop gyms. I was curious, and maybe I'm jumping ahead here, but I was curious, Ed, of your thoughts of like, what are your thoughts on Planet Fitness and those type of gyms?
Well, actually, they were former Gold Gym owners, and kind of like the gang that couldn't shoot straight, and they were so frustrated trying to make their gym a success. They just said, "Screw it, we're going to just charge $9 a month or 19," and it worked. But actually, when I opened my first gym franchise, my first franchise with Gold's Gym 44 years ago, June 16th, 1980, we were charging $19. So I people who think that Planet Fitness invented the low-cost model don't understand that when we started franchising Gold's Gyms, we were pioneering that model. We were making working out affordable. Back when I joined my first gym at Berkeley, UC Berkeley in 1963, it was $500 a year. It was expensive to join a gym. And of course, that $19 back then was equivalent to $54 in today's money, but still it was relatively affordable. So Gold's Gym really pioneered accessible fitness.
I agree. And speaking of history, there's a lot of history here, especially with, Eric and Scotty. Scott, why don't you get into your connection with Nutrition Analysis, which is, again, so attached to what Ed helped pioneer when he was running the gym.
Yeah, well, Ed, I was working at a Gold's Gym in Brooklyn that also owned the gym in Staten Island. And I was managing the gym, and Neil came in and did a seminar talking about altering body composition. And this is the late 80s, early 90s. So that phrase really wasn't used by anyone except for him. And I walked up at the end of the seminar, and I said, "I want to work with you." And he said, "Okay," because why don't you run these nutrition analysis programs as your own business? So I ran them in Gold's Gym of Staten Island, Brooklyn, as well as Queens. And I brought them up into the top 10 of the country, and then he hired me corporately. Soon after, Apex Fitness was kind of formed. That's when both Billy and Neil kind of separated. And I helped develop the entire Apex Fitness and nutrition program, and then traveled all over the country to Gold's Gyms all over the country. In fact, you probably know the name Gene Lamont. I spent probably about 90 days working in his gyms. I think at the time he had 8 or 9 in the Oregon area. And he was a phenomenal operator, and in the Northwest, they were doing things that no other gym in the country was doing. Their juice bars were incredible. Their pro shops were great. They were maximizing the model and getting so many people, more dollar per member, because people would spend hours at the gym. It would be very social for them, and it became such a culture up there,
I was partners with Gene Lamont in those 9 gyms in the greater Portland area. Actually, I designed all 9 of them.
I love the downtown Portland one. It was my favorite.
Which one?
The downtown Portland one? Downtown?
Yeah, Pearl Street. That's people ask me what's my favorite gym, and that is my favorite gym. It was a former screw factory with 35-foot ceilings. I would love for a Gold's Gym Venice to look like that. But that was a fantastic club. Actually, it's the same size as Gold's Gym Venice, about 26,000 square feet. But I had 4 other partners in the Gold's Gyms in the Portland area. All of them had wives, so it was. But we were a great partnership. Unfortunately, Gene went on to be CEO at Gold's Corporate, and I don't think was as successful there as he was in Portland. Why, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I mean, I had a great deal of respect for him because we spent a lot of time together, and just looking at his business model and what he was able to do in the Portland area was incredible.
We were pioneers there. I mean, one of my older partners, Steve Rance, called me, had moved to Portland because of his daughter needed special treatment. And he said, Ed, my God, the gyms up here are still using rope cables. We need to do something. So actually, it was because of Steve that I then got involved in the first Gold Gym in Portland on Pearl Street. And then we grew to 9 clubs over time.
Yeah,
But that was a wonderful, just a wonderful collaboration. I say in my book, it takes a team, and I was a designer. One of the other partners was great at negotiating leases. Steve was great with equipment. Gene Lamont was good at management or marketing. So we really had a wonderful a group of guys and gals making that gym work. And of course, Nutrition Analysis was started by Neil Spruce,
Yeah.
who was one of my finds I talk about in my book. I met him at a bodybuilding contest in the Bay Area, and he worked for me initially in San Francisco.
yeah.
It's an amazing
I know the
story.
story.
You saved
Yeah.
him from whatever dangers he was involved with too. I know he had a little bit of a lifestyle that you helped pull him from and be much more driven. You were saying, Scott?
I apologize for the dark glasses. I've been living in Texas the last 19 months, and the eye doctor said I have sun damage, and I have to wear glasses that tint, and also normally wear a hat. So that's what you're seeing here. So actually, tell your listeners who's not aware of it, I wasn't aware that walking outdoors so much in the sun is not a good idea without sunglasses. So I learned something at age 79.
Hey, did you move
Transitionals.
out? You moved out to Texas? You living there now permanently?
Pardon me?
Are you living in Texas now permanently?
I don't know. I'm working on a new gym concept. I'll go anywhere it takes me. And actually right now that may be Las Vegas. So we'll see. But I've been in Austin trying to get something going with John Mackey, the founder of Whole Foods, who wanted to start a new gym chain, but that's not going anywhere. So if you see my social media on Instagram, you can see that I may be working with some investors who will get something going in Las Vegas.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
I think we all read somewhere. Does it have to do with virtual reality, Ed? Is that where you're going with this concept?
It uses virtual training, virtual reality for strength, and virtual training for cardio and yoga stretching. But I really feel that something new is needed right now in the gym, in the fitness world. That the people like you that existed in the 80s and 90s no longer exist in any great number. And, these smaller facilities are okay, but there's a huge market that's not being catered to that I think we can use technology to engage, educate them, and entertain them. And that's what I'm working on.
So Ed, you said you're 79, right? Is that what you said? 79 years old?
Yes.
And I mean, look, you're an extremely successful guy. You could be sitting back resting on your laurels. So what drives you to keep going?
Well, I see something. I really do. I again, because I've been around so long, I have the sense of history and where we're going. I've seen, Gold's Gym grow from 4,200 square feet to 26,000 square feet. Change is the one constant. And I don't think people really understand that. 24-hour LA Fitness, you can't just build a 35,000 square foot box and expect it to last forever. The market's changing, the world's going to change faster after the pandemic. And I don't really believe we're catering, we're offering something that young people like. The world Americans are getting fatter. We gained a lot of bad weight during COVID. I think COVID was horribly mishandled by our government, our leaders.
I think we all agree on that.
I just saw an article in today's Wall Street Journal indicating that Sweden, which did not shut down, had actually fewer deaths than percent of population than the countries that did. And I know gym owners in Sweden who told me they stayed open, they flourished. I think 30% of the gyms in America supposedly shut down
Yeah.
permanently after COVID. And I know more gym owners who've killed themselves than people that died from COVID. I mean, it affected not only people's well-being, but the damage done to children. The educational system is huge.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, I read that half of Americans gain an average of 29 pounds. So think of the diabetes and other health issues because of that. So
Wow.
the shutdown did more harm than good. And I think we know the mask didn't even work. That the 6-figure number, the 6-foot distance number was made up.
Right.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So, it's horrible how it was handled. Some of the gyms I've been involved with were closed 26 months. If you were in Texas or Florida, they were only closed 4 months. It's a huge
Well, I'm in
difference.
Florida, and there was much less than that, believe it or not. It was like 6 to 8 weeks, maybe, you know?
Wow.
Yeah. So imagine the differences. And of course, now when the gyms reopened, the landlords wanted full rent, but
Yeah.
they weren't in full occupancy. So there's going to be a lot of lawsuits right now, a lot of problems regarding commercial real estate and COVID and the gyms. It's pretty ugly out there.
Yeah, I'll agree.
Scott, you and I were talking about,
All
Go ahead.
needlessly.
what was that, Ed?
I say it was all needless. I mean, again, people not speaking up. I'm old enough to have lived through the era of AIDS, and granted, that's a whole nother disease. But 34 million people, according to Google, have died from that. So 7 million dead from COVID out of a population of 8 billion. That's a thousandth of 1%. That's nothing. It wasn't worth shutting down the world for.
And did those people die with it, or because of die with it, or from it is always a question, because the comorbidities that existed, and those people, they would have probably passed away anyway.
Right. We don't really know how many died because of that, because the hospitals were getting a couple of grand if it was COVID, and not as much if it was something else.
And then if you use a ventilator, you got double.
It's beyond tragic.
Yeah. You were going to say, Chris?
Yeah, no, I didn't mean to interject, but I know you and I were talking previously about the grade 8.
Yeah.
That you mentioned. I thought that was a great question for Ed.
Neil told me about, there were 8 people that he called the grade 8 that really, were instrumental in creating and growing Gold's Gym.
Did you have a question for me? I'm sorry, I was moving to someplace quieter.
Yeah. Neil had mentioned back when, and to some of us, that there was a group called the grade 8 that were the 8 people that were really instrumental in growing, and Gold's Gym. Do you recall?
No, I'm sorry, I'm not getting. What did you call them? What group?
The grade 8.
No, I've never heard that.
Because the names I came up with was Neil, you, Pete, Paul, Tim Kimber, Derek Barton, and I couldn't think of the other one.
Well, yeah, I mean, Joe Bozich, perhaps. I never heard us referred to as that, but we built a team that's very. I talk about it in my book. Again, the era of Jack Welch, the CEO of GE, has proven to be, that's the wrong model. Silicon Valley has shown that it takes a team to build a great company.
Yeah.
Steve Jobs didn't do it all himself. Elon Musk is not doing it all himself. I think Elon hires or interviews every employee himself. I mean, you got to build a team.
Mhm.
Neil Spruce was great. Joe Bozich, our managers were terrific. Tom Wilson. We had a lot of great gym managers. Gary Sechrist, Derek Barton was tremendous at PR.
Yeah.
Paul Grimkowski and Rich Minzer were helping with the franchising, the licensing.
Yeah.
I think when I was going to your gym, Darren Lanigan was your front desk guy or your manager, if I remember correctly. He had the big glasses, really well-built guy, Darren Lanigan. I think that was his name.
Might have been Tom Wilson.
Okay.
Hey, Ed, just to go back, what was your impetus to start Gold's Gym? What was the motivation, or how did that spark? Like, how did that happen?
Well, in my book, I write that Pete Grimkowski was traveling the world, and many people were asking him about, what's Gold Gym Venice like, and he realized that not all of them could travel there. So he thought, well, why not bring Gold Gym to the people in the form of a license or franchise? And I'd gone to UC Berkeley and knew that there was a gym for sale in San Francisco called, ironically, Diamond Gym. The
Oh, wow.
owners thought the next best thing to gold was diamond.
Okay.
So that they weren't doing well, and I thought I could make it work. So I did that in 1980. It was only a year and a half after the three of us bought Gold's Gym. So it was a pretty, daring move in hindsight to begin franchising, right away. And I thought we had something, and I still worked as an architect actually for the following 5 years, but then eventually just quit, realizing that we were really onto something, and it was more meaningful for me to work to build the gyms than to build buildings.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
One of the things I caught from the book, I was saying to the guys before, I love some of your quotes on how, we were just talking about how you picked your team and what the team offered, and it takes a team. I mean, some great quotes. Integrity, intelligence plus energy was like your qualifications versus, someone who had a resume but didn't have the passion. One of the quotes I really, really loved was, it takes a lifetime to overcome a Harvard education. I thought that was super cool. I think we all run into those people in our lives and in our careers where someone comes in as the almighty super smart person, but they're not connected. They're not part of the fabric. They don't have the DNA. It may not be as genuine as what you did and what you wanted, or what we all do for our own careers. So I think that's a really important qualification, just to like get to know that person, and where's the alignment, what kind of person are they, and I really love that part of the book about how you described how you qualified people for the jobs.
Thank you. I never really looked at resumes. I interviewed the people, and it's shocking that TRT, the company that bought Gold's Gym in 04 and owned it for 17 years, went through 8 CEOs, most of whom had, major degrees in business, and basically did nothing. They went from 704 gyms in 17 years to I think it was 610 when they went into bankruptcy. So they didn't grow at all. So it's and how hard it is to grow a franchise. I mean, the business model is so simple. You obviously buy up your success. I'm sure this is what McDonald's does when some owner wants to retire or sell. The corporate owner knows how they're doing because they see the numbers, so they can cherry pick the better franchises to buy. So what a wonderful way to grow a company. And TRT did not do that. They bought other gyms, or did open new gyms. So very stupid use of money, in my opinion, because it takes a couple years for a gym to open and be fully profitable normally. So if you can buy an existing gym and that is making money right away, and again, it's not all about making money. I have my mission statement there in the book. Nothing disappoints me more than a group of adults that can't work together to provide a good service, make some money, and have some fun doing it. Obviously, to have some fun, you've got to be making money. It's not all about making money, but you've got to be profitable, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think one of the quotes too, and it may be from TRT, you got to correct me if I'm wrong. when you were parting ways in whatever that's described as, because of all the wisdom that you gave them to do this. I think someone's mentioned you don't really know the gym business. And then you replied, yeah, I essentially only invented it. But I don't know anything about the gym business. I thought that was pretty
Well,
wild.
and actually unfortunately, that was Gene Lamont when he became CEO at Gold Gym International, and he'd been my former business partner in Portland. He said that they'd hired somebody from Midas Muffler who was handling the franchising. He said, because Ed, you don't really know franchising. And I said, Gene, it occurs to me I only invented it. And by the way, when's the last time you bought a muffler? I mean, again, that's another dying company that
Yeah.
some of the CEOs that TRT hired were from Blockbuster, excuse me, and other dying industries that, are not the kind of people you want running this kind of company. So, yeah, we invented it.
It's amazing.
I was the first.
And I don't think people realize Gold's in its heyday, because I've been to several Gold's Gym conventions, when I was with Nutritionalysis and Apex. They were incredible. I mean, the camaraderie that went on, they had award nights and gym of the year they would present. It was such a culture within Gold's Gyms all over the country. And it was like a trade, that Gold's Gym convention was like almost like an Olympia Expo. That's the way I felt it was. It was incredible.
Well, there was a lot of excitement. It was really, our main event for the year.
Yeah.
No, we really, that was always, I think we got up to 1,200 people. We basically filled a third of the Vegas hotel every year. And our owners were, because we gave away 2 or 3 free room nights, so our owners were there all in the same building.
Yeah.
And they learned a lot from each other, not only at the convention, but probably more around the pool or the gaming tables. And that was, again, a mistake that the new owners made. They basically didn't give any free rooms away. So our owners spread out all over Vegas, and they lost that opportunity of bonding.
Yeah. I remember it was in the Fontainebleau in Miami.
I went to that one once too, Scotty. For Gold's.
And it was just, I mean, it was, every Gold's Gym convention, I had a blast, because I'd see all the gyms that I would service, and they'd all be there, and they come over to the Nutritionals or Apex booth, and it was great. There was a buzz in there like you would go to an Olympia Expo. That's all I can equate it to.
Well, we took a survey of our owners, and most of our gyms, the majority were east of the Mississippi, and a lot of them wanted to have an East Coast convention. So we were in Florida several times, and actually, I gave my farewell speech in 2001 at the Fontainebleau. I remember, but that was a wonderful venue.
Yeah.
Yeah, for our listeners, Gold's Gym was the name in the gym business back in the day, and Scotty and I connected and have a 30-year friendship because of Gold's Gym. We met working at the same Gold's Gym in Staten Island, New York, and have a lifelong friendship. So when that came to Staten Island, I was like, Gold's Gym's coming? Like, Gold's Gym was, this incredible name. Like,
Yeah,
you guys really built you built a brand, you just, an experience.
And I had the opportunity working for Neil to travel all over the country, and I was in Gold's Gyms in almost every single state. I've seen so many of them.
Yeah, Neil was, I think, got into over 300 Gold's Gyms, and we were in 47 states. I think, and occasionally those 3 remaining states changed, North Dakota, South Dakota, Wyoming, and Louisiana. But we had quite a presence. I think at one point we had 75 gyms in Florida, another 75 in California.
And, a testament to Neil, and I'm sure you'll agree, is when we formed Apex, all the gyms flipped from Nutritionalysis to Apex literally overnight, because they saw Neil as Nutritionalysis.
Right. Yeah, that was great for Neil. Unfortunately, that was sort of the end of the Gold's Gym, supplement business. But it's amazing what Neil has done with that, and what happened with that brand. So, yeah, it was one of, again, many eras we were part of.
I
Definitely.
mean,
I mean,
and Gold's Venice, like, was the who's who trained at that gym, from not just bodybuilders, obviously it was the mecca there, but movie stars. And I've been there a few times, and I saw Kobe Bryant there one time, and it's just like a who's who. Ed, I'm sure obviously you've met all these people, and just crazy how many famous people have been through those doors.
I often didn't recognize the celebrities. I didn't watch much TV, and or
Really?
I don't listen to a lot of modern contemporary music. And I remember I walked into the gym, and someone said, "Hey, there's 50 Cent," and I looked down at the floor. I realized not really, and that was a rap star.
that's
That's
phenomenal.
great. Oh my
Uh,
God, that's great.
but there were many instances like that when I was introduced to celebrity. I remember my receptionist was screaming, and I looked out the window what was going on, and there was some kid on a dirt bike, and it turned out to be Keanu Reeves, and who I couldn't have picked out from the crowd. So
That's
anyway, there were
funny.
a lot of fun moments like that. But I think they felt like they were just one of the boys or the girls at the gym.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
That's
can tell
amazing.
you from, what Eric was saying before and what Scott was saying. I was honored to have trained there for the really golden era from like 91 to 94. A lot of the names that you reference in the book that I want you to get into, from Lee Priest arriving to Matarazzo to Quadzilla, Gary Strydom, all those experiences. And I got to enjoy it really at all different times of the day, whether it looked like this one behind me or the different forms that it went through. All you had to do is walk in. Actually, all you had to do is drive up. Whoever was in the parking lot, you'd get an idea. Hey, am I here at the right time? Where there are a lot of my favorite pros here, and then you'd walk in, and like I said, behind me, you'd see, on the cardio, maybe Chris Cormier would be up there, or Paul Dillette, or Flex Wheeler, Rico. They all trained together all the time. So the experience that you allowed me to have training in that gym, those many years, or any of us that trained there, from there to Gold's Fullerton, where you'd run into Sean Ray or Laurie Donnelly or Patrick Lynn. George Eiferman used to train at Gold's Fullerton, an old timer. And then even where I lived in Long Island in Belmore, Gold's Belmore was, my God, Dave Palumbo, Jimmy Pelletier, Troy Moore, a lot of pros. So just Gold's just had it. Like, you had to train at a Gold's if you didn't want to have any fear of missing any opportunities or anybody. And why don't you get into some of those names that you did provide, that ticket, that room and board, for a short window, so they could have a bigger window in life. I think the names that you guided were amazing.
No, nobody seems to have any bad memories of that period. For many of them, it was their first time on a plane, or they were all in their 20s. It was just a great time in their lives.
Yeah, and what the culture that you created within Gold's Venice, and it's called the Mecca, and everybody migrated there. People just moved there so they could train there and learn, experience, and be seen. That you created that.
Well, that was the thing. You had to, as I write in my book, nowadays you can become a celebrity from your home using your phone. But back then you really had to go to Venice.
Yes.
Magazines did not send their photographers out
No.
to shoot people. You had to come to California, and we made our gym accessible to all the photographers. The first call I got after we sold in 04 was one of the photographers saying that TRT wanted to charge them $350 to shoot in the gym. So they obviously didn't get it.
No, not at all.
It was all those photographers that helped make Gold's Gym famous, and I'm grateful to them.
A question I have: how do you feel? How do you feel? Because I've been in a lot of these Gold's gyms, and I've seen them change. To either 24-hour or Powerhouse. The fact that they're no longer Gold's gyms, how is that had affected you and makes you feel? I mean, is there any remorse?
No, it's just greed and stupidity. TRT,
Excellent response.
I'm gonna have to
it
change the
just-
name of this podcast to The Truth.
no, the TRT basically, for the average owner, increase their fees sevenfold. I dropped the name in my gyms I was involved with myself. I couldn't afford to stay at Gold's Gym, so I don't believe, I understand why owners drop the name. It's sad, but we got them going, and many of them are still prospering.
That's great. Yeah, you definitely gave, I'm one of those examples of that excuse. I mean, my father's job moved to the West Coast. I was already in my first year of college in Long Island. And he's like, "Hey, you want to come out?" I'm like, "Oh, I could train at Gold's." I mean, that was like a major part of my decision making of going from the East Coast to the West Coast, and I
Yeah,
was able to
well,
train there for those years.
it was like a pilgrimage, like just to
Yes.
go there. I had to go
Yes.
just to say I got to train there once, Yeah.
Or me as you know, a 20-something-year-old guy, you see someone walk in with, to any gym with a Gold's Gym Venice tank top. Hey, you'd go over to them and you start speaking to them. Hey, you were at Venice. Who did you see? I mean, people don't understand, like, I guess what we've all experienced,
Well, that's the surprising thing is that, again, there was no social media, so people actually, after their workout, would hang out. They go to the firehouse and then come back. So they might spend all day there if they're on vacation, because
Yep.
there was no other way to take it all in.
So true, so true. Eric, why don't you go through? I know there's like an unbelievable history of Ed leading certain athletes over to the Animal
Yeah.
brand that you really could speak to, which, I mean, it's amazing history that everyone should appreciate.
Yeah, sure. For our viewers, not only was Ed involved in Gold's Gym in Venice, but he brought a lot of bodybuilders and wrestlers. We'll get into that too, because I want to pick his brain on the Ultimate Warrior. Would bring them to California, help them, give them a place to stay for a little while, and help them get on their feet. And I know that you brought several athletes over to Animal and introduced us to them. Frank McGrath was one of those. Am I accurate in saying that, Ed?
Yes, I mean, there were half a dozen people that I sent you.
Yeah.
Roman Fritz was a house guest.
Yes, Roman.
Derek Lunsford was the last. I met him
Yeah.
7 or 8 years ago, and I
Wow.
said, he could be Mr. Olympia, and last
You're
year I
right.
was proven right.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ben, not who am I? Evan Senapani. Evan was never a house guest, but I sent him to you.
Right.
Who else? Well, Brad Rowe was a house guest briefly.
Yes.
Yeah,
Brad was
Rowe.
a universal
He's had
athlete for a while.
really an amazing career. Great guy. I mean, it just, not the most incredible physique, but certainly an incredible personality, and he did a lot with it.
Yeah.
Again, it's not all about lifting weights.
No, you're absolutely right. And that was kind of the philosophy at Animal. It wasn't important that these guys won contests. We didn't care. We never pressured them to compete, and we didn't care if they won a contest or not. It was about how they could connect with our consumers.
Yeah, right.
And that was a big thing. And I mean, just getting us Frank McGrath and those guys, and Evan, who, I mean, these guys have had tremendous long runs with the company. 14 years. I think Evan's on like his 17th year. It's just, those are tremendous finds. And when we would get the email from the owner of Universal, he said, Ed recommended this guy. Let's look into him. It was always a good tip. It was always a good person. And
I think it was my architectural background that I could see beauty or whatever symmetry or order that a lot of people couldn't see. I
Right.
had that architect eye.
how did you stumble upon these guys? Like, how did you find Frank McGrath?
Well, actually, Bruce Patterson, who had been a house guest that I write about in the book, called me up and said, Ed, there's this really good bodybuilder, and he's on the verge of quitting. You need to talk to him. And I had just sold Gold's Gym the first time in '99, so I flew actually to Newfoundland to meet him and his parents, because his parents weren't going to let him come out to Venice.
Oh, wow.
So they were probably one of the few sets of parents who cared. Most of my 535 house guests, I only met the parents of about a dozen. That really just shows you, I think, how few really cared about what their son or daughter was doing. So I convinced Frank's parents to let him come out to California. He actually ended up staying for almost 2 years at 4 different houses of mine.
Wow.
So he and Joe Millionaire, Evan Marriott, are two of my longest running house guests.
Interesting.
Wow.
A
Yeah,
lot of my house guests stayed 5 months. That was kind of an average stay to get on their
Right.
feet.
Right.
It seems like
yeah.
a long time, but I don't know. I guess it was Ben Franklin that said house guests are like fish; they stink after 3 days. But very, very few of my house guests ever stayed that brief a time.
You
So
wrote something really special in your book, just to the point that you made before about how many parents you met through this process of them making the pilgrimage, and your Mike Matarazzo story is unbelievable with the family and meeting the father and them inviting you over for a Sunday dinner. I thought that was amazing. Like that just had to be a sight to behold.
I would say Mike Matarazzo and Frank McGrath had the most loving parents or caring parents, and I, I used to get half a dozen thank you card, seasonal greeting cards from Mary, Mike's mother, Easter, Christmas, birthday, you name it. So she remains grateful. We talk online. So even though her son died way too early,
Yeah.
he had an amazing life, and I think she understands that. I love Rich Piana's quote about some people die never having lived, but that won't be people like Mike Matarazzo. He had an amazing life, and he basically inspired a lot of people, like
Oh,
the
yeah.
Ultimate Warrior. John Cena was inspired by the Ultimate Warrior. So even though Jim died in his 50s, so did his dad and his grandfather, but he had an amazing life, and he's still a memory to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And what was he like off camera? What was he like in real life?
Hellwig, Ultimate Warrior, he was like he was on camera, off camera. I mean, he was intense. I've never met anybody like him. I would say John Cena's very similar in terms of being focused or determined or dedicated, but the Warrior was kind of, basically, as they say, that on steroids. He was he was just so over the top. I mean, he became, he changed his name legally to the Warrior. He was that character.
I
Yeah.
actually think that's really cool to hear. You know what I mean? I think that's why he was such a successful character in the WWE, because that you're saying that was authentic. Like, that's cool.
And he
To
also
me, as a
had
fan.
he had a physique that people were just amazed at, because in wrestling, a lot of guys looked like him, and that was a huge attraction,
Yeah,
That was my pitch to McMahon, is that people don't want to see ordinary in the ring. They want to see somebody, extraordinary. And Hellwig is 6'3", and he probably weighed 275 at his best. And he had a very good physique. And I've sent 22 guys, I think it is 21 and 22, into the pro wrestling.
Wow.
Sting just retired.
Yeah. You found Sting, or you got him involved in wrestling?
Sting was my manager at my Gold Gym in Reseda.
Get out!
And I
Wow,
encouraged him
that's
to
cool.
get into wrestling. But yeah, he just retired, and
Yeah.
he was Hellwig's partner in the early days.
That's right. I can't remember the name of the tag team, but it's some cool picture that I'm two
Freedom
together.
Fighters.
There you go, Freedom Fighters. That's so cool, man.
So awesome.
How did you find Jim Hellwig? How did you get introduced to him?
Well, he was a bodybuilder that had won, I think, a Gold's Classic. People forget that back in the day, Gold's Gym sponsored a lot of bodybuilding.
Oh yeah, I've competed in many of their shows.
He had won a show back there, and this is the early '80s, and at the time, I didn't really realize that being 6'3" is a handicap in bodybuilding. Arnold's like at the perfect height, maximum height of 6'2", and Jim came out to California to train for a national level show and stayed with me, but didn't do well, and had quit bodybuilding and was going to chiropractic school in Atlanta. And I had formed a Gold's Gym wrestling team of 4 guys, and the big guy in the group had quit. We needed a 4th wrestler. So I called Hellwig up and said, are you interested in professional wrestling? And he said, how much would it pay? And I said $100 a night. He said, well, that's more than I'm making now. So he actually came out to California and then trained with Sting, with Steve Borden, and they became a tag team initially. Then they
That's
each went
cool.
their separate way, but they kept their makeup.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Two
And I got to
legends.
tell you, the amount of lives that you have touched, I mean, just in the short time we're speaking here, it's unbelievable.
Well, it's, I
500
think
plus.
too, I mean, I don't want to, basically make too big a deal out of it, but I mean, even someone like John Cena, I mean, he's now affected millions. So if I had never gotten him into pro wrestling, there would be, there would be that void. And he says in the foreword to my book, I'm grateful that the universe put Ed in front of me, because without Ed, there would be no John Cena. And, that's incredible for him to say, but it's the role of fate in our lives that I talk about often now. Life is half about fate and then half what you do with it. And I approach many people, not many, but I mean, I've approached some people regarding, say, going into pro wrestling, and they blow me off. But John Cena, I'll never forget that when I tapped him on the shoulder outside the Gold's Gym Venice in the parking lot, I said, had you ever thought about pro wrestling? He said it would be his dream. So again, I think nowadays people are too skeptical or leery or whatever. We have all these ways to communicate, but we're not communicating. We're not socializing. And I'll go up to people now, and it's not the same as it was back then, where people were more open to things like that. So I would encourage people to dare to dream and talk to your neighbor, talk to people. Don't be glued to your phone all day.
That's a
Agreed.
great message, man. That's
Yeah,
a great message.
I totally agree.
And I think that's the basis of you, the foundation of you, Ed. I mean, I was telling the guys, like, I'm like, you gotta like the organic part of you where you grew up in a home where your family invited strangers or wanted to give, people a great dinner at your Sunday dinner. And like that molded you, that impressed upon you to do what you did for all these other athletes. I think that's just amazing how you grew up in that type of household of giving.
Yeah, I grew up in it. I mean, the world I grew up in was so different than most of my house guests. I guess through them I realized what an extraordinary childhood I had by comparison.
And
So,
where did you grow up? Where are you from?
Pardon me?
Where are you from? Where did you grow up?
I grew up in Omaha, Nebraska.
Wow.
I was the oldest of 6 kids. I went to a Catholic grade school. I went to a Catholic high school. My household, my family house was surrounded by neighbors who had 6, 7, 8, 10, 12 kids. We were actually the smallest family on the block. I kind of wonder what was wrong with my parents, but no, they were big families, and people got together, and we it was a different world.
How
Lot
did
of
you
giving.
wind up in California?
Pardon me?
How did you wind up in California?
I got laid off work in 1975, and I was working in New York City, and as an architect, and I ended up taking a job in Los Angeles. And on that route, as I talk about in my book, I met Pete Krimkowski, and basically 4 years later, after moving to California, I was one of the owners of Gold's Gym.
Wow.
So
Yeah,
again,
I
as
think
I
I
write
read-
in my book, and I would tell people, sometimes you have to move for opportunity. Um, Only 1 out of every 10 Americans supposedly ends up outside a 100-mile radius of where they were born.
Yeah, I've heard that.
And I think that statistic is a bit old, but certainly back then it wasn't, because most of my house guests, it was their first time on a plane. So I think of the 80 or so people laid off work along with me back in New York, stayed in the area. I was the only one that left the area, but I don't know if I had a better life, but I've had a more interesting life. So I would encourage people, if they're not happy where they are, to look at moving. I tell that to all my Uber drivers. I said, are you happy? Because most of them, 90% are foreign, And
Yeah.
I say, if you're not happy here, it's a big country. There's a lot of opportunity elsewhere.
By the way, Ed, my dad was an architect in New York as well.
Oh,
That's good.
well, you know how vulnerable they are to recessions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Somehow
you-
attorneys and accountants never get laid off, but architects are vulnerable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you were the senior designer of a Neiman Marcus in Beverly Hills, right?
Yeah, that was the job that got me out there. I had worked on a Neiman Marcus store when I was working in New York. So here I am, 30 years old, and I've given $16 million to design the store, which I just saw last week, and it's held up pretty well. I wouldn't call it great architecture, but it's certainly a good building, and it's been one of their most profitable stores. It's either first or second almost every month.
And
But
definitely,
I'm proud of it. It's it's a good building and worn well. And but I did a half a dozen other buildings in LA which got built, and some of them are quite are pretty good architecture actually. The headquarters for the Port of LA I'm very proud of.
Nakatomi Plaza, if I'm not mistaken, right? You were involved.
Yeah, that was my last building, was Fox Plaza in Century City. That was
that crazy?
1985.
Wow. That's real cool.
John McClane, Die Hard, baby.
Great. One of my favorite movies.
But you'll notice the building is it's very phallic, but it's also very symmetrical. And I would tell the bodybuilders that's my getting up on stage and posing. But if you look at it, I mean, it's just a beautifully symmetrical building, and there's so much ugliness. I mean, I'm in Dallas right today, and there's just so many ugly high rises. It's like, really, can't we do better? But yeah, I'm proud of Fox. It's a tiny building now. It's only 34 stories. When you look at what's being built in New York City, it's pretty tiny. But it was back then. It was a big deal.
Well,
That's the thing.
I for one am glad that you were let go, because, and I'm sure these guys will agree, because you started Gold's Gym. You affected Neil Spruce, who affected me and my entire life. So indirectly, the amount of people, and Eric can speak to it. I mean, Neil, he changed the whole direction of my life, and even up to this day, and what I do every single day.
Well, yeah, Neil and your stories are quite, it's wonderful, really.
Sitting on his living room floor, creating Apex. It was an incredible experience.
Yeah, I write about Neil in my book, and you can. I have the numbers in there, how many employees he has, but or basically representatives nationwide. But I think it's over 10,000, right?
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And Ed, I know we want to be conscious and respectful of your time. I know you're at an event right now. We all got to witness a recent speech at the Arnold of Jay Cutler, which is probably one of the best Lifetime Achievement Award speeches that I think we all could attest to. And man, did he go out of his way to talk about you? It was emotional. If you want to talk about Jay Cutler a little bit and what he meant to you, and if there were any other athletes that really made an impact on you.
Actually, Jay got on a plane after the Arnold to fly to LA to be in my Lifetime Achievement Award.
Not surprised.
So I really surprised. I was really honored and surprised, and he was a big hit there because, of course, many bodybuilding fans. But yeah, I met Jay at 19 in the Gold's Gym in Venice. He'd come out. He had won the Gold's Classic back in Boston, and came out because of a misprinted in the newspaper regarding the airline flight. And I went up to him in the gym to congratulate him, and I said, "Oh, by the way, where are you staying?" And he mentioned the name of the motel. And I knew the area it was in. It's a very bad area of LA. Back then, there were a lot of bad areas. And I said, "Well, you can stay with me." So Jay and Carrie stayed with me, and he says that it was the second time he stayed with me. A few months later, that he decided he was going to change his life and go from being a policeman or studying to be a policeman to be a bodybuilder. So
The turn of
he
events.
he thanked me for introducing him to Joe Weider, and I did that to many people, and got them a contract.
Yeah, you got a great story about when you were working with Weeder and your ads were getting pulled from Golds, which really helped your business. Then you found a way to align with Joe or have an extra meeting with Joe by being an architect and helping him with his homes in exchange somewhat for ads. I thought that was like really, really cool how those two worlds came together.
Yeah, actually, I was very close with Joe, not only because of the work I was doing as an architect, but we just got to be friends. And then oops, oh God, I'm getting low black battery here. Okay. My my phone is dying.
Okay,
We'll,
so
we'll,
we
we'll,
won't
we'll
keep you
wrap
too
it up.
long.
We're ready.
No, we'll wrap it up, of course. And I mean, we talked about
I
so
was
many
at
great.
full, I was at full power, so we've used, unfortunately.
This is what happens when Encada speaks. We take up a lot of power. We give a lot of power too.
Has it been an hour? I don't know.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Yeah.
It's an amazing hour beyond that. And
Before we do wrap it up though, why don't you please give a plug for the book? So
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
people can look up the book, at least let's tell people what the name of the book is.
The book is called The Three Musketeers. It's on Barnes and Noble and
See it.
Amazon. Best to look under my name, Connors, Connors. The audiobook portion is 5,000 words more. It took me 7 days to narrate 7 hours. It's
Wow.
my voice. And so, yeah, please, you got to know the history.
Yeah, I agree.
Right here.
And just so you know, Ed, that's what we the three of us are very, when it comes to body being very historical. And we want to, I guess, teach the young, people out there about the history because they can't appreciate, where they are unless they knew where it came from,
Right. Well, good night, gentlemen. Thank you.
Ed, thank you
Yes,
so much. We
Ed, it was
greatly
an honor to
appreciate
have
your
you on
time.
our show. Again, please provide us with whatever thumbnail, if you want us to be a picture of the book, yourself, you recently winning the Hall of Fame inductee award. We'll have this posted on YouTube under Gym Guys Podcast, and can't wait to share it with everyone. Just the stories are incredible. Your influence and your effect on all of our lives is incredible. Really, it's humbling.
Thank you
Thank
so
you
much
very
for what
much.
you've done. Thanks for what you've done for the industry, really.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Take care, Ed. Enjoy your event.
Bye.
Pleasure to be
Bye-bye.
here.